Welcome to the Stop Down Photography Podcast, episode 15. I'm your host, Scott Davenport. Today's topic is sketching over planning. Hi everyone, welcome back. Thanks for joining me today. It's nice to have my voice back. I'm not as scratchy like I was on a couple of the previous podcasts. Whatever cold I had, I've kicked. Which is important. Some context. If you're listening to this in the future, it's mid-April 2020. We are in the middle of the COVID-19 virus that is just keeping everyone indoors. And anytime you start to get a cold, you get a little concerned. But at least for me, I'm still safe, sheltered in place. It's been a few weeks. There are other places that have been 6 weeks plus. And maybe it's that sheltering that triggered this week's topic, sketching over planning. This is an approach that I use with my photography that actually stems from my travel habits. I'm thinking about travel quite a bit, probably because I can't go out with the camera and I certainly can't take a trip anywhere. So I've been looking through photos of past trips. I've been going through some video footage that I've had from previous outings with the camera. I'm turning some of those into YouTube videos. I've just been thinking a lot about travels past, and it dawned on me how my approach to travel, or more accurately, travel planning, has changed over the years, and that has crept its way into my photography. So let me start with some background, some then and now about how I would plan for trips in the past. The first phase was detailed planning. I planned, honestly, too much. An example, a first trip to Paris, wanted to see it all. The fear of missing something was in full effect. Packed in a laundry list of sites, must-see places, and it had to get down to, time windows. Museum A at such and such a time, get lunch and you have this much time, walk to this particular location on this particular street so you could see something along the way. And ultimately, the plan became too rigid. Sometimes it felt rushed because, look, things happen. Something as simple as the traffic light not changing for you quickly enough, throwing off your itinerary, or the line to get a cup of coffee took longer than you'd hoped. But I saw a lot, but I didn't leave with the experience that I guess I wanted. I saw many things, didn't experience as much. Then that pendulum swung to the opposite end. I'll call this like being the feather on the breeze. A trip I made with my wife to Turkey before we had kids was incredibly fluid. Basically, we had the plan of we land in Istanbul, and 3 weeks later, our flight leaves from Istanbul. And other than having the first night's hotel taken care of, so when we landed, we knew we had a place to sleep, nothing was fixed. No hotel bookings, no firm travel plans, no tickets, no travel passes, no bus ticket, nothing. And this was in the late 90s. So it's this pre-internet age. It wasn't like, oh, great, let me whip out my smartphone and find a place to stay. So it was definitely an adventure. We ended up doing a lot of things. Visited a Turkish bath. We stumbled our way through the bus systems, figured out how those work, almost got separated on one of those trips. We found ourselves on a tour of the World War I trenches in the Gallipoli Peninsula, which was fascinating. Even a side trip to Egypt happened. Lots of memories came out of that. Plenty of stories. However, also spent a lot of the time of that trip simply planning. Every new city you arrive to, first order of business, find a place to sleep. And sometimes that could take hours, and it didn't always work out very well. You arrive well after dark into a city. It wasn't as easy to find places. Again, this is pre-internet age. Can't just Google it. Spend a lot of time figuring out transport. Where do taxis come and go? Pre-Uber days. What about bus systems? Are there trains? All those things. and all those things that took time away from potentially having another experience. Now, as that pendulum swung back and forth between completely planned trips and no plans at all, it settled down on what I'll call the sketching approach. And this is what I use for my personal trips now, what I use when we do family trips. We sketch things out, but we don't lock things down. Of course, there is a list of must-see attractions. When you travel for pleasure, there's usually a reason you choose a given spot. You go to Rome, of course you're going to go see the Colosseum. You go to Paris, of course you're going to see the Eiffel Tower. You go to New York, of course you're going to eat a slice of pizza. These are the reasons you go to those places. And then the rest, what we do is plan out like a half a day at a time. And it's very loose. Something like visit a museum and a meal. Walk to an open air market, walk through a certain segment of the city, and the must-see attractions are sprinkled into these plans. Now, the nice thing about this half-day loose plan approach is it's very fluid. If it's raining one day, it'll swap in an indoor activity for an outdoor activity you had planned. Or if you're having fun doing whatever it is you started doing, just keep doing it, stay on it, keep enjoying it. And you can just drop one of your, air quotes, lesser itineraries, your lesser half days. The sketches have space, they have breathing room, they afford the opportunity to get sidetracked, to go off on a tangent, have an adventure, and not completely miss your must-see things. You can embrace the what if. What if I turn that next corner? What if I hike over that next ridge? What if I just stay in this cafe and keep talking with the wonderful local people I just met? The sketch leaves the trip open to possibility. I might not see every site. I will see the ones that are important to me. I'll also have time for a better experience of a place, a deeper appreciation for a town, but just being open to the possibility. So I prefer a sketch over a plan, because the sketch is a balance. It's a balance of taking in the must-haves and leaving space for the what-ifs. So this sketching approach to travel planning has really influenced my approach to photography too. I bring this sketching over planning mentality to my photo outings. It's a similar approach. Now, I'm a landscape photographer, so yes, I'm checking the weather, checking the tides, checking the winds, the cloud forecasts. I know the general direction that the sun's going to rise and set and at what times. I have a decent idea of what I can expect on a location. I do sufficient planning, so I have a good idea about my photo subjects, tells me what gear I should bring, so I'm not carrying too much stuff. But I'll also be open to looking around whatever location I've chosen. Maybe there's something on the way there or the way back that would make a good secondary shoot. If it's a multi-day photo outing, I'll use that half-day planning approach. If I'm enjoying one location because it turns out to be such a photo-rich environment, I stay there. I enjoy. I capture more frames. I don't worry about missing out at some other spot. I won't be missing out. If I leave where I'm making great photos, then I miss out. Keep making the great photos. I can be open to an experience. I can pivot. If one location's not working, you can wander. I don't want to have a rigid plan that closes my eyes to other photographic possibilities. I treat the field work like asset gathering. I'll be mindful of my compositions, of course, my camera settings, all those things. Yet my goal is to capture frames, gather assets. I can always discard them later. Now, a small sidebar. Planning is different when you host a group. When I host a workshop, I plan much more diligently. I know where I'm going to park. I know how long the hike is. I have backup plans B, C, D, E, and F in case anything goes wrong, weather doesn't cooperate. That's a different type of travel planning where you have people that are relying on you to get into a good photo situation. So I'm talking really here, this sketching idea, it works great for me for personal shoots. Another angle on this sketching idea is capturing the photo itself. Now, what I capture in camera is most likely not going to be the finished product. Let me explain this a little more deeply here. So as I've grown as a photographer, I've gotten to know the capabilities of my camera as well as my post-processing tools. These can influence each other, and they can influence each other in both directions. When I'm in the field and I'm faced with a scene that has a blown highlight or some distracting element, or the light tones are either too cool or a little warmer than I'd like, I know the capabilities of what my camera can capture, as well as what I can do with my post-processing tools. In the case of a blown highlight, for example, my Sony cameras have a feature called zebra stripes. It will show you areas of the frame that may get clipped, and the keyword there is may get clipped. I know the capabilities of the camera and what I can retrieve from the raw file, where if a certain spot looks like it's blown out, but there's only a small amount of blinkies in that area, not a problem. I'll take the frame. I know that I can recover that in post. In the case of a distracting element, I know I have digital tools that I can remove unwanted objects. Now, I try to compose in such a way that minimizes those things, but sometimes there's just something you can't get out of the frame. Either you can't reposition yourself to avoid it, or if you were to reposition the camera, it would change the dynamic of your primary subject in relation to the scene, and that wouldn't be the stronger photograph. If it's something I know that I can digitally remove later, I will. I'm not a photojournalist, so I have no problems with removing things. I talked somewhat about that notion back in the episode about truth and photography. If you haven't listened to that one, have a look. I'll drop a link in the show notes for that. But my point being, when I'm capturing the frame, I'm already thinking about things I may need to do in post-processing to make sure I get the photo that I have in my mind. The raw file, the capture, that's a sketch. It will be turned into a final image later on. This sketching approach over planning, it bleeds into my post-processing as well. Many times I've got a photo, I know what I want to get out of the colors, out of the contrast, the crispness, and I go to work on those things straight away. And then I reach a point where I ask myself, what does the photo need next? It's something to accentuate the subject I'm working on. And that's where it lets me play the what if games. For example, it's a seascape, and that's something I shoot all the time, right? Of course I'm thinking about seascapes. So there's an ocean wave that's rolling over some rocks and it's creating some nice foam. What if I were to brighten that foam a little bit or crispen it up? How would that change the dynamic of the photo? And I'll try that experiment. I'll go off on that tangent, see where it leads me. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't, but I'm open to trying that out. It's akin to the travel part of it. The color, the contrast, those are my must-haves. And then the other things become the what-if games. What if I walk down that street? What's around that next corner? Same idea with the post-processing. If you've ever watched any of my live edit videos on YouTube, you'll start to get a feel for that, where I'll try something, I'll see where it leads. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it just gets erased and you try something different. But using the sketching approach, even to a post-processing workflow, it really has some value. It lets you be open to something you may not have thought would be good for a photo, or in an artistic direction you might not have initially thought about when you first sat down to work that photo, and it emerges as part of the process. It's almost a little bit magical when it does happen. Little bit of studio news. If you're interested in my photographic process all the way from vision and planning through the field work to a final printed photo, not just process, but printed photo, I've got a new video course out called Field to Frame. I partnered with On1 on this one, so all of the steps in the back end are all done using On1 Photo Raw. I'll just drop a link in the show notes so you can check it out. I'm really happy with how the course came out, and I have to say I'm really also very happy with the photo that resulted. If you're part of the Patreon members, you saw the final photo. I had asked for some help in determining a particular crop, which crop felt stronger. And so, that was one connection that the Patreon members have with this video course. You did help me finish off that course, that photo, and that photo is now on the desk that I'm recording the podcast on. So I'm looking at it, and it's in a beautiful frame, and it looks great. If you're interested in learning more about the Patreon community, you can check the show notes for a link. There's also a button on every page of stopdownpodcast.com. You can learn more about it. I cannot tell you enough how much I appreciate Patreon supporters. You are the reason this podcast is possible. That will bring this topic and episode to an end. Hope you think about this sketching idea, see how it can work into your photography. And if you enjoyed today's podcast and your app has a rating button, I would appreciate if you would rate. And if you can review this podcast on Apple Podcasts, very much appreciated. That helps keep the podcast visible to others so others can discover this and listen along with us. Until next time, my name is Scott Davenport. Have fun.